Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, September 13th. This is the Istio Ambient Weekly Contributors Meeting. And first up on the agenda, we have Ben talking about ambient installation.
Yeah. As you can see from the link, we raised a PR. A PR has been raised to actually address the issue I think John raised a few weeks ago around, with Ambient, we don't want to install support installing Ambient via the Istio operator. That has already been merged, right? The operator will refuse to install Ambient now. That's fine, but then that still leaves the question of Istio control and Helm. So this PR linked here, the 46716, would remove ztunnel from the ambient profile, which means effectively that the ambient quick start doc doesn't work anymore, right? Because it will, it needs to be updated. So the idea is like, okay, so we want to push people to use Helm. Let's document Helm. And in this PR, the author, thankfully and very appreciatively, they documented the steps for Helm, which I think we didn't really have before. That's worth looking at, but I think for me that raises the and like it, that'll work. We can update the quick start guide for that to actually just say here's how you install Ambient via Helm. My concern is that it's a lot of we talked about this a little before, but it doesn't use a top level chart. So I'm installing the CNI chart. Step 1, step 2 is I install STOD. Step 3 is I install ztunnel. Step 4 is I install maybe something else. Those are the main ones, but it's essentially installing 3 separate charts, which is a worse flow than what's currently documented. And we're going to have to update the documentation with a worse flow. Do we want to just do a top level ambient chart that just collates as Helm subcharts these existing minor ones? If not, why not, right? Because I think if you look at the actual docs, the steps that are documented here, it's going to be a worse install UX. And it doesn't really have to be. It just, that's how we're doing it. So that's kind of what I wanted to raise. And yeah, Costin, go ahead.
I think one of the mistakes we made in operator and in the old Istio charts, first charts before we refactored them, was combining things that should not be upgraded at once. Because ambient upgrade in particular, it's a very, very tricky business. CNI upgrade is a very, very tricky business and is done by someone else. And what we really, really want is to keep them decoupled because there are different times. When you upgrade STOD, you definitely do not want to upgrade ambient as well. So it will be returning a regression, a big regression to the original mistake we did in Istio 1.0, basically.
So I guess I disagree that it would be a collation or a regression, because you can just have they can be atomic charts under the hood that you can still install separately. You just put a dependencies field in your chart.yaml and have a chart that does nothing but just says, I want you to install these 3 subcharts as TGZs, right? It literally just fetches them as independent Helm charts and installs them one after the other, which is what the doc does, right? So I think you can still keep them independently installable. Like you can install ztunnel separately. You just have a top level chart that says, dependency is the ztunnel chart of this version, the dependency is STOD of this version, whatever. And that can be like that's exactly the same as a profile, effectively, except it doesn't use a profile. And it could be just for like tire kicking. Like obviously, if you want to do a real thing, we would maybe recommend you don't use that. You install them independently and upgrade whatever. But I think it's for the purposes of tire kicking, making people install 3 components that all have to be installed and are not optional in order for ambient to work seems a little goofy to me personally. But that's
how about a sample or a demo? I mean, having a demo chart for people to, or having a sample, with clear indications that this is never something that the user will do in production. Because again, the idea with the problem was people believed that, hey, because it provides a simple chart, it's suitable for production, which never was.
Yeah, I think we could probably curtail that a little bit by basically saying that top level chart can have no resources. It just has dependencies on our existing component charts, right? It effectively just installs them with a specific set of values, and that's it. If you want to add, we won't accept PRs that add logic or templates to that top level chart, right? It could just literally be, here's the components that are installed, here's the value set, boom, there you go. That's a tire kicking demo for you. I think we could do that without falling back into that trap. And yeah, it's fine if it's putting it in a demo or samples directory. I think is fine. That makes perfect sense to me. But yeah, okay. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I think the only concern I have is removing the ability to install Ambient with IstioCTL effectively. I agree it's not necessary for production, but at this point in time in Ambient's life cycle, the ability to just say, hey, run this code command to download IstioCTL, and then run IstioCTL install dash profile Ambient is a really smooth UX in my opinion. And if that's suitable for production, as long as we have some way to still match that, I'm good. But I'm just a little concerned about hearing ztunnel not be installed with the IstioCTL.
Raise an issue, comment on that issue if you feel that way. Like, I think that's valid. It is breaking. Like, that's kind of why on that issue I was like, I don't want to merge this until we have a document in the quick start that says here's how you can do the exact same thing via Helm at least, right? Like, I don't want to just break Istio control and not have a really well paved out Helm thing. But I agree. Like, ideally, I think the idea is Istio control would be a light wrapper on Helm, and we would update Istio control to basically do the same thing, and then you would have parity again. But if we do it this way, where it's broken, we break it now and then only document Helm, then Istio control won't work for some period of time, which might be something we want to talk about.
Before we go into the IstioCutl, why? Why do we need two ways to install? We have Helm download, Helm install, which for a demo is absolutely perfect because you don't have to download IstioCutl particular version. You just don't have to download anything at all. You just run two Helm commands, one to download the repo from whatever repository and one to install it. And that's it. Why would we need another way where we ask users to choose between Helm installer and downloading IstioCutl and eventually do the same thing?
Because users have two different reasons and contexts in installing Ambient, right? If I'm trying to install this in my production clusters, then yeah, I expect to have to go and read through all the different values I'm setting, understand what they're doing, because I'm accountable for this during an outage. If I'm just trying to kick the tires on Ambient, I want that road from a community member perspective. I would hope that the on ramp would be as smooth as possible for somebody to kick the tires on the thing.
I'm not arguing. I completely agree that we want this demo. The demo is not a problem. My question is why for the demo we need two ways to do it. For production is production, and we may keep using IstioCutl for production, or we can use Helm for production. I understand, but if we are saying that other demo mode that installs everything and everything else, we probably don't need IstioCutl and Helm. We can have demo is just Helm.
So IstioCutl already supports basically acting as just a wrapper around Helm. That's more or less what IstioCutl install does today. There's a few asterisks to that, but that's the gist. You make a change to Helm, it applies not only to the Helm chart, but also to IstioCutl install. We also already support a demo profile specifically from IstioCutl. You can set up a demo profile that includes a few defaults. Yeah, I know. I wish it was no asterisks too, John. Maybe we can iterate in that direction, but regardless of users' particular needs and whether maybe they would be better served by Helm, the fact is a large number of our users use IstioCutl to install onto clusters. If we've already got support for a demo mode in Sidecar, I don't see why we wouldn't expose it through Helm and make that Helm exposure available in IstioCutl, just like it already is for sidecars.
We also have operator. Why don't we keep operator? That argument can be said for all the crazy things we did. We want to simplify and have a very simple demo experience. Why would add an extra step download IstioCutl of a particular version when you don't have to?
Because our users are already doing that step. They're already using IstioCutl. They're accustomed to using it for installing Istio. While the operator had some severe limitations around functionality that caused us to want to sort of encourage users to choose other options, the same has not really been true of IstioCutl. It's a very thin wrapper around Helm, and if our users like it, I don't see why we would pull that out from under their feet.
Yeah, do we have evidence on IstioCutl install not easy for getting users started? I think people in the context of a Helm, people are more talking about wanting to use it for production, but not necessarily for get started. I think Istio is definitely easy as far as just one single command, right? I download the binary. I can even install it on the plane. I don't even need network. So I guess I'm
Do we have
very much
we have
in
any
favor
evidence?
of not changing our get started guide to use Istio.
Do we have any evidence that people enjoy downloading another binary and running them on their machine? I mean, when they can do the same thing with 2 Helm commands?
We do actually.
Not everybody using Helm though.
Istio is consistently one of the top selected install and upgrade methods on our upgrade feedback surveys.
There you go. Yeah.
We've not asked users why, and asked them to explain their thinking on that. That might be worthwhile in the future.
I mean, the fact that it's a recommended way, maybe, I don't know. Okay, that's fine. I mean, if you want to keep downloading Istio, that's fine. As long as it's clearly just demo profile, and I mean, I'm not planning to use demo, so.
So can I ask a quick question? Are we also, outside of demo profile, are we also saying Istio is not recommended for production? Is that true? Did I hear that wrong?
No,
So
bundled is not
same
recommended. Bundle install is not recommended. And it was never recommended or a good idea.
Oh, it
Installing
was
at the same
never
time CNI
recommended.
and
Okay, that wasn't recommended for Sidecar even right now, right? We recommend people to have the gateway separate, even for Sidecar today.
exactly.
Okay.
Then I would qualify that a little bit in that Istio is a little bit difficult to integrate with CI/CD.
Yep.
And because of the complexity of install, if you have a lot of values.yaml, modifications to your install, we do recommend that you store that in a CI/CD system so that you don't end up wiping out your own settings when you upgrade. And that's not impossible to do with Istio, but it's much easier to do with Helm.
Yeah, agreed. And also that's why some of the users still using server-side the Istio operator, right? Because they can fit in the Istio operator YAML with the stored, generated, transformed Kubernetes YAML file.
Yep.
Okay, I think other people have hands. John?
Yeah, I think this is based on the original issue I put, and it was kind of a list of increasingly crazy ideas, and the last one on the list was remove ambient support in Istio. I'm actually not in favor of doing that at this point. So I like the far more part was like remove it from the in-cluster operator, which is basically deprecated. So having a, carrot or stick to get people off that is one thing. But while we're in the state that Istio is still fully recommended and supported and whatnot, it probably doesn't make sense to do that. Or if we're going to do that, then we should also not do it halfway and kind of start pushing towards Helm, which is a whole nother can of worms. So I think there's been a pretty large consensus that we maybe shouldn't drop it from Istio, and there's just debate about other things, unless I missed someone that wanted to drop it from Istio.
That sounds like what I'm hearing, and yeah, like that's what the PR here does. I just kind of wanted to get a consensus on that. I think there's consensus sounds like don't want to drop it from Istio for sure right now. I guess the next question is, do we want to update the quick start guide with, or start doing that, updating that with a Helm option, or do that as a Helm first doc, or do we want to leave it?
No, my point was to not have two ways. I mean, if the consensus to keep Istio profile demos, that's perfectly fine. But one or the other, not both.
But if we do have Helm available instruction, we should put it in the official Istio install guide, right? It just doesn't have to be in get started guide because we already have Istio.
Yeah, as long as it's somewhere, I think that's my main
concern.
Yeah.
I want to make sure this get started is not, get started in production, because again, there is a confusion because getting started Istio in production and doing a demo for Istio. There's a huge difference, and people have not understood this difference, and they did a lot of things that are demo friendly, but or features that are demo, and confuse it with production. So get a demo maybe guide, but get started should be the guide for getting started in a production environment with all the separate steps with someone, super privileged had install CNI and then, restart to put or whatever the safe operations is for Istio getting started.
Maybe we call getting started the quick start guide.
Or demo guide, maybe.
But I agree with Costin. We need to have a very visible qualification on that page that these settings are great for kicking the tires, trying things out. They're not for production settings, and probably a link over to your production onboarding guide.
Can we get that in general? I think that if we don't already, I think the production Istio checklist with the recommended approaches for doing all the things would be extremely useful.
Yeah, because I'm looking at our Istio install guide right now for sidecar. Like, we don't recommend people to say, hey, let's install Istio D first. Let's, install something else second. Like, we don't tell people sequentially in the right order to install things. It's just one bundle with the default profile at the moment.
And that's a problem. That's a huge problem because we are not only don't tell them how to install, but we don't tell them how to upgrade safely.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So maybe I think we should look at how to fix this for sidecar too, because Ambient is right now is alpha. It's not recommended for production anyway. So this is not like a huge issue, right? People are still kicking the tires anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly why I asked, like, do we have this somewhere that I just haven't seen? And if not, it would be really great to have that. From my firsthand experience trying out Istio 3 years ago, I had to look through and read the README for figuring out how to the right incantation to get the Helm installs working, and then which thing to upgrade first in my GitOps pipeline. So something that lays some of that out would be fantastic. Yeah.
Lynn, you mentioned something that I didn't quite understand. I'd like to follow up on. You mentioned that in Sidecar, we don't instruct them to install Istio-D separately. I think that's by design, or what is the motivation for having them install Istio-D and separately from what?
Yeah, I was just referring to the stock, right? So this stock essentially says when you install Istio, you install Istio-D, ingress gateway, and whatever the default profile does. But to Costin's point, the recommended way to install Istio should be, the gateway should be separately from Istio-D, and there may be other caveats as well. So this is definitely not necessarily the recommended way in production. That's what I was just saying, for the sidecar, we're not putting that in practice of the recommended way in our documentation.
Gotcha. Yeah, the gateway, I know we have the capability of having users install gateways separately. I don't know what the default is. That might need consideration.
Yeah, so the default includes the gateway and includes the egress. I don't think ingress, but not egress. But for Ambient, we remove the ingress for this particular reason because we have a fresh start. So when you install Ambient, with the Ambient profile, you would not install the gateway. I think now the discussion on the issue is now, should we even install Z-tunnel in the Ambient profile for the production profile, right?
Yeah. No, for Ambient, it totally makes sense having those things separated out. I understand that. Thank you.
So if I understand what we're saying correctly, we do not want a demo Helm ambient chart because we only want one option for demo tire kicking, and that one option is the Istio control profile we already have. Is that correct or not?
No.
No, okay.
So we want a demo Helm chart, and that will be how Istio Cuddle installs the Ambient demo.
Okay, good. All right, that's what I was making sure of.
Wait, so we want a demo? Because I thought that we just want one way to do demo, which is Istio Cuddle.
I may have misunderstood the consensus. I'm sorry.
Well, I think to Mitch's point, the current issue is that Istio Cuddle is kind of split from Helm. Ideally, Istio Cuddle is just a thin wrapper around Helm.
Yes.
And that's not the case today. And this is like an opportunity to make that the case.
But okay, but the order of operations there is until that is the case. Like, do we? So yeah, I guess the question is, do we want to have that Helm demo documented in a quick start anywhere before Istio control is also effectively wrapping it? Like, do we always want to just document, here's how to do it with Istio control, here's how to do it with Helm, and unless we can do it with both, just don't update anything? Or do we want to like say, like, we could add the demo chart, maybe update the one of the guys? Just like, that's the thing, is like, we want to do all of it before we updating the docs, right? Like, we want to make sure that Istio control is a pure Helm wrapper. It's using exactly the same charts, the demo chart, whatever. We add the demo chart, then we update the documentation when all that is done. Is that correct?
Does anyone else feel like the docs should never change except for adding a new production readiness install approach? Because ideally, Istio Cuddle remains, the interface is the same. We just swap out the profile logic in Istio Cuddle to just do a Helm install.
And we wouldn't want to add a Helm option until that swap out happens, is what I'm asking. Like,
I brought up Helm. I brought up Helm because I thought it's better to not have to download Istio Cuddle and to it's because many people already use Helm. But based on the discussion, my concern was to not have two ways to do a thing, because we had 4 ways, and with Ambient we have an opportunity to have only 1 way.
Yeah.
Especially for demo. So demo, Istio Cuddle profile demo, it's absolutely fine. Whatever happens inside, I don't think it really matters. Users will still run 1 command. For the production use, I think it's very important to prioritize second-day operations and upgrade. And for that, decoupling Istio-D from CNI and zTunnel is critical. So you must be able to upgrade and install Istio-D independently.
Right.
With a different frequency. And CNI and zTunnel probably requires a node upgrade or whatever safe solution different vendors will choose, because we still don't have a very safe way to do it, but except the rolling upgrade and cordoning. And that needs to be done with extreme care, and probably doesn't have to be done so often, because zTunnel is relatively
right.
small.
But that doesn't affect the idea of a Helm demo chart, right? Like, you can already do that today.
It does. Why bother? I mean, it's enough to do 1 command for demo. I mean, how many?
That's what you're saying. That's what you're saying, is don't do that demo chart. Just have, or at least don't document that or publish that.
Don't document it. Don't expose it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
One way or the other, if we want to expose this in Istio Cuddle, we have to have a Helm chart. Like, what Istio Cuddle install does is applies Helm charts. Whether we publish that chart to users, I guess I'm fine publishing it to users. I don't see why we wouldn't, but it doesn't seem like a deal breaker one way or the other.
The problem with documenting the Helm quick start chart is that it sends mixed messages, because you've got one Helm install that's separate and has a higher barrier, but it's actually safer for production. But another Helm install that's easier, one command install, but it's not safe for production, and you're essentially forcing users to choose the vegetables over the candy, and they both look like Helm.
But that's like the same. Yeah, but that's effectively the same with the Istio control demo, right? Like, if you're using Istio control, it's the same problem. There's the simple, safe one thing that you shouldn't use in production, right? Like, it's sort of the same problem.
The signaling's different though. So if you've got if Helm is the quote unquote production installation method, having 2 Helm install processes sends mixed signals, is what I'm saying. Whereas Istio Cuddle is the demo, quick start, I'm doing this at a workshop or a conference, get things running quickly approach, and that's consistent versus Helm being the production way.
That's the dichotomy you want to keep. Okay.
So Keith, I don't think we have any plans to remove production installs from Istio Cuddle, right? We have consistent feedback from our users that Istio Cuddle is one of the more popular ways to install and upgrade Istio in production. So production ambient, as we come out with these 3 separate charts, will need to be accessible from Istio Cuddle. I don't think we're discussing removing that. So then the question is, Istio Cuddle will support both demo and production level ambient use cases. Should Helm support both demo and ambient, or demo and production level ambient use cases as well? Again, I would advocate for doing that. So for instance, users who are using Argo CD, if they'd like to kick the tires on ambient using ambient demo, we would have to tell them, well, you can't use Argo CD to do that. You've got to use Istio Cuddle instead. sort of a break from their current flow.
And if Istio Cuddle is going to be a wrapper around that demo chart anyway, like it'd be kind of hard to stop people from just using that if they wanted. Like, I mean, we could just not document it and hope they don't notice. But yeah, I kind of feel like just say, here's how you can do the same thing with Helm if you want. Like, I don't know, but I don't have a huge horse in that race.
Yeah, can they just refer to the production instruction like Costin said in the chat?
Well,
I mean,
I'm confused though, because I thought that how do you have a production install with Istio Cuddle?
You use the Istio Cuddle install command and you set the profile to something other than demo. I think we even have a profile called production for some recommended hardening values.
But what for ambient, so you're saying you would have to do production install of ambient with Istio Cuddle, you would have 3 Istio Cuddle commands.
It sounds that way, yeah.
Yeah, it would be
Okay.
multiple, right? To allow you to break
Absolutely.
into different components.
And Argo in particular, it's a tool perfect for production, and probably you will use Helm production charts and you will roll out to production clusters most of the time. And if you just want to do a demo with Argo, I don't know why would you do that, but you could still use the production charts independently because Argo is another tool that automates a step of Helm installs.
Yeah, so to do a demo of Argo CD using the 3 production charts would require 3 different Helm chart imports into Argo, 3 different resources that you're configuring. I think the point of the demo chart is to reduce that for ease of use or for demos.
Do you have a user who needs to do demos with Argo in particular at only those 3 charts, or do you have users who use Argo to automate a demo with 20 charts, including their applications and booking for whatever we have?
I think both of those users exist. The reason for wanting to use CI/CD to create a demo is because many companies, their development environments are set up to match their production environments closely. So they try to replicate things like only using CI/CD to modify the cluster, even in development.
Mitch, you answered the question in this statement. If you want the demo to reproduce the production, then we'll use Argo the same used in production with the independent charts, including your applications, everything else. So that's pretty much clears down the things.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. We could just say that if you're using CI/CD, you have to follow all 3 steps. Configure each chart independently. I don't think that's a great outcome for users, but it's not the end of the world.
Why would not be a great? I still don't understand why people believe that putting 3 steps in Argo it's a huge problem when you want to reproduce production environment.
The reproduction of the production environment in dev is for the purposes of the organization. It's through typically the platform engineers are going to set up a platform that users can use. If someone who is on one of those platforms wants to kick the tires on Istio, it seems reasonable to let them do so efficiently. It's sort of like 2 separate personas with separate objectives.
I guess, yeah, I feel like if the demo chart is there, we should just document it. But I think for the purposes of, for now, we can just say, look, we need a demo chart under the hood anyway for ambient that is a top level that collates, so Istio control can consume that. And the docs already have the Istio control demo. Like maybe we just leave it as Istio control now. I think it would be interesting in the future maybe to expose both options. A lot of projects do that, right? If they've got their own little CLI tool for installing, they say, here's how you do it here, here's Helm. Maybe if we did both, we could do user surveys or download checks and see which people prefer, and that might help. But at least for the purposes of immediate short term, it sounds like we do need that demo chart, and we're still undecided on whether we push people to that in guides versus just production, where in production we do insist they install components individually with Helm without the demo chart. Whether we change the demo guides to have Helm demo or Istio control demo is a secondary question, which I guess we can punt on if everyone is okay with that, because it feels like we don't know yet. maybe the only way else we know is we do both and see what people like. But for now, we could probably punt on that a little bit. Does that seem reasonable? All right. That's all I got.
Any update on service entry?
Kevin, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I can talk about it at a high level. I hadn't put the rest of it in the doc, but the newest version of the proposal was going to be a mesh config where an operator who operates the mesh can provide a list of basically namespace resolution. So it can provide the order with which service entries will have their conflicts resolved. That way it's consistent for all clients in the mesh, and it's a clearly defined resolution order. And then it's a nice side effect. It would also allow admins to say that, you know, these namespaces have higher priority than you, or vice versa.
I was more concerned with L4 versus L7 separation of service entry and ambient. I mean, how service entry, which part of service entry will work with ambient, which part will work with gateways, because
Yeah, it would,
mixing L4 and 7.
there wouldn't, the intent would not be any of the L7 sniffing or anything in ambient. Like Z-tunnel would still just be L4.
Yeah, so basically we need to define what fields in service entry apply to Z-tunnel. If you don't have any waypoint, any gateway, how service and what subset of service entry is supported in ambient with Z-tunnel only.
Yeah,
That's my main concern. I mean, isolation, I was actually okay with keeping it namespace only, but I don't really, that's a secondary issue. It's primary issue is L4, L7.
yeah, I think we need to delineate what works with Z-tunnel only and what requires a waypoint. Like I said, the doc needs some work, and I need to work on it. And John has his hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking for the tab. I mean, it's kind of hard to say based on just the short summary and not the doc, but I thought the goal was to prevent a new service entry, not conflicting service entries, from doing damage. Like someone creating the first service entry that's google.com and then changing google.com for everyone.
Yeah, so the way that in my head that would be resolved is if the mesh operator said that your service entry resolution path is just a dot, then the service entry would have to be in your namespace for it to resolve it all. So no one could break you unless the operator allowed other namespaces in.
So it's like these existing import rules, but scoped only to service entry.
Yes, and as a mesh config.
Yeah, because you can already do that. It's just it applies to all resources instead of service entry.
So this would be a global configuration that the operator would configure the scope of service entry by default, whether the scope is global for everyone else in the cluster was just whether it's the global scope for everyone else in the cluster or whether it's the namespace scope for everyone in the cluster.
Yeah, that already exists today. It's just not scoped only to service entry.
What's the config for that today?
There's
I've never used
many,
it.
so you can do service entry. I mean, a sidecar, you can have it apply to all namespaces if it is in the ecosystem namespace.
Oh,
And in mesh
yes.
config, there's
Okay.
already export to defaults, which you can set the default export to for services, virtual services, and destination roles. We don't have service entry specifically because the Istio model is kind of abstracting over services from different registries.
Okay, got it. Okay, so that will be
So-
a natural extension if we allow admin to configure it.
I don't know. It seems awkward to treat service entry differently here.
And don't, I mean, a number of users will probably use the gateway API and the Gamma gateway, where interference between namespace is generally not allowed except very specific cases. So I would ask to at least have a mode where a safe mode where it's compatible with the new way, and there is no cross namespace pollution at all. I mean, basically by default, it's service entry only take effect in the same namespace, or only globals are supported.
Right. So for Gamma, there's no equivalent for service entry right now, right?
It's debatable. Technically, with Gateway API, you can create almost equivalent with TCP route, because effectively what service entry fundamentally does is defines an IP that is captured and routes that IP to a particular set of destinations. So you could do a lot of the stuff with TCP route and TLS route.
But that's not like specified. These are the external services I want to go through and allow people to access, right?
Yeah, that's TCP route. Basically, TCP route, and it does exactly that. So it's specifying external service with IP, VIP, and then you can route it to different backends. But
Okay.
it's
So
not
it's to
complete.
configure the routes to the egress gateway.
Yeah, L4 at least. It's not complete because there is no way that I know to specify an external address as a backend ref, except, cheating a bit and doing some hacks. But technically, that's the closest to us in the standard. John, I'm correct, or?
Yeah. I think they'll probably add a mechanism, but that's just a guess. There hasn't been much proper discussion.
Yeah, we have to add something. I mean, it's the biggest gap right now is that we only have backend ref to a service, and there is no way to represent something that is outside of the cluster except service import. So external name or something will need to be added at some point.
These are all helpful thoughts that I can take into account. Like I said, the doc needs refinement. I hadn't been looking at it this week, so I'm not sure there's a very productive conversation to be had without the updates and proposal in front of us.
And if you can share the doc early, probably can provide some extra feedback there. It will be great to move forward with this because it's late. It's a very important topic.
So are you proposing, Costin, are you proposing in the mesh config to allow service entry to specify scoping for the mesh?
My primary goal is to make sure that new users who use Gateway API or Gamma can have an experience that is safe and consistent with the new APIs, meaning that it's either service entry is a global thing that is defined by cluster admin, so it's in Istio system, and the role of the person who defines external VIPs is clearly separated, or it's only local to the namespace. No import and no export or other Istio specific features. So if we have a safe mode that is friendly to Gateway Gamma, I'm happy. Other than that, with Istio, we already have 20 ways. Having a 21st is not a problem.
So there's no way to do conflict resolution, but have a basic config for scoping.
For Istio, yeah, there is, I don't know what, but for Gateway and Gamma, there is no conflict because again, everything is either namespace or it's a global. It's a Gateway namespace or in the individual namespace.
Okay, so to wrap this up, maybe Kevin, we can bring this up next week if you think the doc would be updated.
Yeah, that's a good plan for me.
Okay, sounds good. Should we move to the next topic, which is John's blog?
Yeah, nothing major here. Just I did a little bit of testing and it's relevant to people here. I think we've said this a lot of times, but I've never actually remember seeing numbers in a non-obscure place that isn't visible to most people. But I hear a lot of times like concerns about ambient. That's like, it's user space. It must be slow. And it's not slow. The kernel is not magically faster. No. So it's just a small post trying to debunk that a little bit by comparing trivial TLS proxy to WireGuard. And TLS proxy is quite a bit better by most dimensions. Well, all dimensions. So yeah, that's all.
Very cool.
Even if user space is slower or possibly faster, could the proxy be still run as a kernel program or a BPF program or something like that? Or in
a kernel program, if you compiled a custom kernel, sure, you could put ztunnel there. Otherwise, you need TLS support in the kernel, which you can kind of do with KTLS, but it's pretty flaky. In my testing of KTLS, which was probably not ideal, but still, the performance of KTLS was actually dramatically worse than even user space TLS. I was probably doing something wrong, but there's like no real usage of KTLS in the wild, so it's hard to find a correct implementation, and it has all sorts of other issues. So,
John, it would be interesting to do a similar, or if you did with Quick, because I personally expect Quick and WireGuard to have about the same performance since they're using the same UDP and same crypto, same buffers. And we spent a lot of time discussing about moving everyone to Quick, but if we find out TLS over TCP is faster than Quick, maybe we adjust plans a bit.
yeah, that's a good point. I was going to, and then I forgot. So if I find more time, I'll do it, and if someone else wants to do it, even better. But it's probably a 5-line change anyway, so not a huge deal.
So John, in your blog, is there any scripts to reproduce if people want to try it? Oh,
I did not put them because it's not scripted, it's semi-manual. I can give you the semi-manual steps if you want to see what I did, but there's the program I ran for the TLS. It's not, rocket science. It's just iperf to the WireGuard IP address or to the local TLS proxy. So.
got it. So for WireGuard, you just enable Cilium. There's nothing related to Cilium, right? Just pure.
Yeah, this is not Kubernetes. It's just 2 VMs, just WireGuard between them. So.
Got it. Okay.
This wasn't meant to be like the most conclusive ever benchmarking thing. Like this, it's definitely not a great benchmark, but the intent was just to kind of dispel the myth that being in the kernel magically makes things better, and that just because we're TLS doesn't mean somehow WireGuard's magically better.
Mm-hmm.
Comparing Quick with WireGuard will also kind of dispel it because, again, one is in kernel, other is in user space, but they are far closer in terms of protocol and crypto.
John, in your examples, the direct measurement, that is effectively plain text, yes?
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you ask Klassen, it's technically not plain text because GCP is encrypting it, but from the user space perspective, yeah, it's just standard iperf to the other end.
Well, and GCP's encryption happens off box, right? Or as part of the hypervisor, or maybe, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a study, I think, about UDP comparing. I don't remember what protocol. I think maybe for WireGuard comparing over the real internet between different countries and long distance. And the conclusion was that many routers are optimized to drop UDP packets if there is collision or overhead, because they are usually part of multimedia. And dropping packets in UDP is a way to send feedback that you need to slow down the rate and reduce resolution and so forth. So intentionally, they are dropping UDP packets, and compared with TCP, where it's optimized to keep packets alive in buffers.
Yeah, something for the quick people to have to be aware of. I mean, if
I'm pretty sure they're aware, yes.
I know, but if their packets are preferentially going to get dropped, it defeats the purpose.
Well, it's not actually, it's intentional, and it's working as intended, because if it's providing feedback that you are the particular link is slow and you need to slow down. I mean, it's providing exactly. It's actually a feature of Quick to have packets dropped, so you know that that you need to slow down and apply flow control basically. It's just that accidentally it prefers TCP over UDP for unfortunate reasons.
Is this really just about GSO? Because like I know that WireGuard is slow because there's a bug in kernel. Do we know, is this just because that bug is not fixed? Or?
There's Tailscale folks did some this type of stuff, and they have a user space WireGuard implementation, and they got it up to about the same numbers as we have in TLS. Like the intent here is not to say that it's impossible to beat TLS. It's just that TLS isn't bad. Like there's a perception that WireGuard is amazing and fast, and everything in the kernel is amazing and fast, and TLS is slow and garbage because it's not in the kernel, which is not really true.
Well, the problem is that you can read the benchmark two ways, right? One is to say that. Another thing is the reason WireGuard is so slow is because kernel is not optimized. There's no GSO applied to WireGuard traffic. So the huge delta can be read both ways, right? So yes, it's slow because kernel is not optimized. But if kernel is optimized, it's so much faster, right?
Is there a kernel optimized version of this that could be used and tested to prove that out?
No, there's just some kernel bug that the code there does somehow disable GSO for WireGuard for whatever reason. I don't know if they fixed it already or not. So that's why user space WireGuard is faster than kernel space.
We just have to wait for that fix to trickle down to whatever kernel versions we're using.
Yeah, and somebody fixed it, I guess. Well, that's the thing, right? That's the fact that it's so slow without GSO means that kernel can be so much faster. So you can read it both ways.
Well, once they fix, we can test again, and probably we'll find out that they're about the same speed with TLS. So I don't think it. I mean, we can assume that if they fix this bug, Magic will become faster than TLS. Maybe it will match TLS. Maybe not.
Yeah, I know. We don't know, but the fact that delta is big means that kernel matters, right?
In a negative way, yes.
Well, John did document Linux version you run, so.
I think it was like 5.10 or something. Oh, you're saying I did document it. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. You put in the blog, so that's good if people have feedback. Yeah. All right, great blog. I think this is very useful. Anything else should we be discussing?
Curious, John, did you try with H2 and without H2 filming? I mean, the TLS?
It's not, it's just plain TLS. It's not Connect.
So maybe it would be useful to have, plain TLS compared with TLS framed in Connect and H2, just to get an idea.
It would be useful for, yes.
John, you also blogged about speeding up our CI/CD system. Do you think you'll be done with that next week?
I have a few more benchmarks I have to run against it apparently. So just kidding. No, I won't be. That was, if it didn't come across, that was purely hypothetical. It's actually some terrible ideas in there.
So I didn't mean you need to run the test, John. I mean, if more people start running some tests, it will be, those two data points will probably be very useful. And probably we should revive the benchmark working group or whatever, where we have automated tests run periodically with different scenarios, so we don't regress. And remember in 1.2 or 3 or 4 still we had this.
Yeah. Actually,
old days.
Keith actually was. Yeah, Keith was also talking about work group efficient. Yeah. All right, should we wrap it up for today? Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. See you guys later. Bye.